The DNA test. My name is Amanda Foster, and I discovered my husband was cheating when I accidentally opened his mail and found results from a DNA paternity test showing that our 5-year-old son Owen wasn't biologically his. Results I hadn't known he'd ordered, for a test I hadn't known he'd taken, revealing doubts about our child's paternity that he'd apparently harbored in secret for years without ever asking me directly whether I'd been unfaithful. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in March, addressed to James Foster in plain white packaging, with no return address beyond a lab name I didn't recognize. Gene Tech Solutions, followed by an address in New Jersey. I'd been sorting mail at our kitchen table in our house in Portland, Oregon. Bills in one pile, junk mail in another, personal correspondence in a third. The envelope looked official, medical, the kind of thing that might be time-sensitive results or important health information. James was at work. He worked as a corporate accountant for a manufacturing company, spent his days in spreadsheets and financial reports and quarterly projections. He wouldn't be home until 6 p.m. The envelope was addressed to him, and normally I respected his privacy, didn't open his mail without permission. But something about the envelope felt urgent. Medical results shouldn't sit unopened for hours. If James had test results for something serious, if there was health information that required immediate attention, waiting until evening felt irresponsible. I opened it, told myself I was being a responsible wife, that James would understand, that medical information was household information that affected both of us. The document inside had DNA paternity test results printed across the top in bold letters. Below that, technical language about genetic markers and allele patterns and statistical probabilities. And at the bottom, highlighted in a box for easy reading, the conclusion that made my world tilt sideways. Probability of paternity, 0% based on genetic analysis. James Foster is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. Owen Foster, DOB 03-15, 220. This conclusion is supported by the analysis of 20 genetic markers with a combined paternity index that definitively excludes paternity. I read it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. The words didn't change. James had taken a DNA test to determine whether Owen was his biological son. And the results said Owen wasn't, which meant either I'd cheated and somehow hadn't realized it or remembered it, or there'd been a mistake at the hospital when Owen was born, or the DNA test itself was wrong, or I was losing my mind and couldn't trust my own memory of my son's conception and birth. I tried to think back to when Owen would have been conceived, summer 2019. James and I had been married for 7 years by then. We'd been trying to get pregnant for 3 years, not desperately, not with fertility treatments or medical intervention, just the natural trying that comes from wanting a family and hoping it happens. I'd tracked my cycles. We'd timed intercourse appropriately. We'd been moderately hopeful each month and moderately disappointed when pregnancy didn't happen. Then in June 2019, I'd gotten a positive pregnancy test. We'd been thrilled, cautiously optimistic at first. We'd had a miscarriage 2 years earlier, and knew pregnancy didn't always result in a baby. But the pregnancy progressed normally. The ultrasounds looked good. Owen was born in March 2020, right as the pandemic was starting, right as the world was shutting down, and everything was becoming complicated in ways we couldn't have predicted. I remembered that pregnancy vividly, remembered every doctor's appointment, remembered the first time I felt Owen move, remembered the delivery, 23 hours of labor, epidural that barely worked, James holding my hand through every contraction, both of us crying when Owen finally arrived healthy and perfect in ours. But according to this DNA test, Owen wasn't ours, wasn't James's, was somehow only mine despite the fact that I'd never been unfaithful, never slept with anyone besides my husband, never had any reason to question Owen's paternity, unless I had and somehow didn't remember. Unless there was a night I'd blacked out or been drugged or experienced some trauma my brain had protected me from by erasing the memory. The thought made me nauseous, but it felt more plausible than the alternative, that the DNA test was wrong, or that I'd somehow given birth to a child who wasn't genetically related to the man I'd been married to for 12 years. I called James. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, what's up? Is Owen okay?" "Owen's fine. I need you to come home. Now. It's urgent." "Amanda, I'm in the middle of quarterly close. I can't just leave. What's going on?" "I opened your mail, the DNA test results. We need to talk. Now." There was a long silence. Then, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He arrived in 27 minutes. I'd been pacing the kitchen the entire time, looking at Owen's baby photos on the refrigerator, trying to see whether he looked like James or like some other man I couldn't remember, trying to make sense of test results that made no sense. James walked in looking guilty and defensive in equal measure. "You opened my mail. You ordered a paternity test for our son without telling me. Why?" He sat down at the kitchen table, wouldn't meet my eyes. I needed to know. Know what? Whether I'd cheated on you? Whether Owen was yours? Why would you even question that? Because he doesn't look like me, never has. Even when he was a baby, people would comment on it. "Oh, he must take after Amanda's side of the family." Or, "Funny how genetics work. He doesn't look anything like you, James." And I started wondering. Started noticing that Owen has brown eyes when both of us have blue. Started seeing that he doesn't have any of my features or mannerisms or anything that suggests he came from me genetically. Lots of children don't look like their parents. That's not evidence of infidelity. I know. That's why I didn't say anything, didn't accuse you, just quietly ordered a DNA test to put my mind at ease. I expected it to come back confirming Owen was mine, and then I'd feel stupid for doubting, and we'd never have to talk about this. Except it didn't come back that way. It says Owen's not yours, which means either I cheated and don't remember, or there was a hospital mix-up, or the test is wrong. Those are the only possibilities. "There's another possibility," James said quietly. "We use fertility assistants." I stared at him. "No, we didn't. We got pregnant naturally. I remember. Summer 2019. No doctors, no treatments, no interventions." "Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain?" "Yes, I'm certain. I remember that entire summer. We were trying naturally. No fertility clinic, no IVF, just us." But even as I said it, a small doubt crept in. Had we? I'd been so desperate to get pregnant after years of trying. Had I been willing to try things I'd later blocked out? Had we done some kind of fertility treatment I'd somehow forgotten? "Check your medical records," James said. If we used a fertility clinic, there'd be documentation, bills, paperwork, something. I pulled up my medical records on my phone. I'd had them digitized through my insurance portal, all my doctor visits, all my prescriptions, all my medical history accessible through an app. I scrolled back to 2019. May 2019. Annual physical, everything normal. June 2019. Prenatal appointment, positive pregnancy test confirmed. July through March 2020. Standard prenatal visits documenting a normal pregnancy. Nothing about fertility treatments. Nothing about IVF or IUI or sperm donation or any kind of reproductive assistance beyond natural conception. There's nothing, I said. No fertility records, which means we conceived naturally, which means I stopped. Which means either I cheated and don't remember, or Owen's not genetically yours for some other reason I can't explain. Or the DNA test is wrong, James said. Lab errors happen. Maybe we should get a second test from a different lab. Make sure these results are accurate before we start questioning everything. We ordered a second test from a different company. This time we both knew about it. This time we swabbed Owen's cheek together. He thought it was a game, kept asking if he could swab our cheeks too, delighted to be helping with whatever science experiment his parents were conducting. We sent the samples to a different lab, paid extra for rush processing, waited 5 anxious days for results that would either confirm or contradict the first test. The results came back identical. James Foster is excluded as the biological father of Owen Foster. Probability of paternity, 0%. 2 tests from 2 different labs saying the same thing. Owen wasn't genetically James's son. I felt like I was losing my mind. I knew I hadn't cheated, knew I'd been faithful throughout our entire marriage. But DNA tests don't lie. At least, they're not supposed to lie. So either my memory was faulty, or something had happened that I couldn't explain or account for. I need to call the hospital, I said, where Owen was born. Maybe there was a mix-up. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they gave us the wrong baby. James looked at me like I was grasping at impossible straws. You were there for the delivery, Amanda. You gave birth to Owen. There's no mix-up. He's your son. The question is whose son he is genetically if he's not mine. I called the hospital anyway. Providence Portland Medical Center, where Owen had been born 5 years earlier during the early pandemic chaos, when everything was masks and protocols and visitors restricted, and the world felt surreal and frightening. I explained the situation to a patient advocate. Said we'd received DNA test results suggesting our son wasn't genetically related to my husband, that we needed to verify there hadn't been any kind of error or mix-up during the birth. The advocate was sympathetic but clear. We have very strict protocols to prevent infant mix-ups. ID bracelets applied immediately after birth. Multiple verification checks before any baby leaves the mother's room. It's virtually impossible for babies to be switched, especially in recent years with our current safety measures. Can you check anyway? Please? We have DNA tests from 2 different labs saying my husband isn't our son's father, and I know I didn't have an affair. So there has to be some explanation. She agreed to investigate, said she'd pull Owen's birth records, review the chain of custody, check for any irregularities. Said it would take a few days, but she'd call me back with whatever she found. 3 days later, she called back. Mrs. Foster, I've reviewed all the documentation from your son's birth. There was no mix-up. Owen never left your room from the moment of birth until discharge. The ID bracelet records show continuous monitoring. There's no possibility he was switched with another infant. Then how do you explain the DNA results? I can't, but I can confirm Owen is definitely the baby you gave birth to. Whatever the genetic situation is, it's not a hospital error. I thanked her and hung up, looked at James, who'd been listening on speaker. So Owen is definitely our baby, but somehow not your baby genetically. Which brings us back to the original question. Whose baby is he? That question haunted me. I started going through my calendar from 2019, trying to account for every day of the summer when Owen would have been conceived. Looking for any gaps in memory, any times I couldn't explain, any possibilities for infidelity I couldn't remember. Everything was accounted for. I'd been working full-time as a project manager at a tech company, came home every evening, Spent weekends with James. There were no mysterious absences, no unexplained gaps, no opportunities for affairs even if I'd wanted one, which I hadn't. My doctor suggested genetic counseling, said sometimes there are rare scenarios, chimerism, mosaicism, other genetic quirks, that could potentially explain unusual paternity results. We made an appointment with a genetic counselor at OHSU, Oregon Health and Science University, where they had expertise in unusual genetic cases. The genetic counselor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, listened to our situation carefully, reviewed both DNA test results, asked detailed questions about Owen's conception, my pregnancy, whether we'd ever used any kind of fertility assistance. "Have you had your own DNA tested?" she asked me. "To confirm Owen is genetically yours?" "No, but I gave birth to him. He came out of my body. He has to be mine." "I'd like to test that assumption," Dr. Martinez said. "In very rare cases, women can be chimeras. They carry 2 different sets of DNA in their body. If you're a chimera, it's possible your eggs came from one set of DNA, while the DNA we'd test from your cheek swab would come from another set. That could potentially explain why Owen doesn't match James genetically. If Owen inherited DNA from a different genetic line that you carry." It sounded like science fiction, but we ran the test. Swabbed my cheek, swabbed Owen's cheek, sent them for genetic comparison. The results came back 2 weeks later. Probability of maternity, 99.99%. Owen was definitely my son genetically, which ruled out chimerism or any other exotic genetic explanation. Owen came from me, but somehow not from James, which left one explanation I'd been avoiding. Owen was conceived using donor sperm, and somehow I'd either forgotten or been misled about how I'd gotten pregnant. But that made no sense. I remembered trying to conceive naturally, remembered no doctors beyond my regular OBGYN, remembered no fertility clinic visits or procedures or anything that would involve donor sperm. Unless James had done something without telling me. Unless in his desperation for us to have a child, he'd somehow arranged for artificial insemination with donor sperm without my knowledge. But that would require deceiving me during a doctor's appointment, would require medical professionals participating in a procedure without my informed consent, would require a conspiracy that seemed impossible. I confronted James directly. "Did you do something? Did you arrange for donor sperm without telling me? Is that why Owen's not genetically yours?" His face went pale. "What? No, absolutely not. I would never do that without your consent. We didn't use donor sperm. You got pregnant naturally? At least that's what I thought. Then how do you explain this? 2 DNA tests saying Owen's not yours. Tests saying he is mine. No hospital mix-up. No affair I somehow forgot about. The only explanation left is donor sperm, and neither of us remembers using it." We sat in confused silence. Then James said quietly, "What if you don't remember because you were unconscious?" "What do you mean unconscious?" "Your surgery in May 2019. Don't you remember? You had surgery for..." He stopped, thinking. What was it for? Some kind of gynecological thing. You were out for a few hours. I did remember, vaguely. I'd had a minor laparoscopic procedure to remove an ovarian cyst that had been causing pain. Outpatient surgery at a fertility clinic that also did general gynecology. I'd been under anesthesia for maybe 2 hours. Came home the same day. Recovered within a week. You think someone inseminated me while I was unconscious? That's assault. That's a crime. That can't be what happened. I'm not saying it was intentional. Maybe there was a mix-up. Maybe they did the wrong procedure. Maybe your eggs were somehow mixed with someone else's sperm in a lab and implanted without anyone realizing the error. It sounded impossible, but it was the only explanation that fit all the facts. Donor sperm, used without my knowledge, during the only time in 2019 when I had been unconscious and unable to consent to or remember a procedure. I pulled out the paperwork from that surgery, the consent forms I'd signed. They authorized laparoscopic cyst removal and any necessary related procedures. Standard legal language that probably covered a multitude of possible interventions. I called the clinic. It took 3 tries to get through to someone who could access records from 2019. Finally, a patient advocate named Karen pulled up my file. Mrs. Foster, I'm looking at your records from May 2019. You had a laparoscopic procedure to remove an ovarian cyst. The procedure was successful, and there were no complications noted. Was there anything else done? Any other procedures? Anything involving reproductive assistance? Long pause. Then, I'm seeing notes here about, this is unusual. There's a note that you were enrolled in a research study. It says you gave consent prior to surgery to participate in a trial studying improved implantation techniques. I never consented to any research study. I was there to have a cyst removed. According to the file, you signed a research participation form on May 12th, 2019, the day of your surgery. Can you send me a copy of what I supposedly signed? I'll have to get approval from our research ethics board, but I'll see what I can do. 3 days later, I received a PDF, a consent form with my signature, my actual signature that looked legitimate, agreeing to participate in research protocol number 2019-042, novel implantation techniques using cryopreserved donor gametes. In plain English, I'd apparently agreed to let them use frozen donor sperm to try to get me pregnant as part of a research study. And somehow I had no memory of signing this form or agreeing to this procedure or being told any of this was happening. I showed the form to James. This is my signature, but I don't remember signing it. I don't remember anyone explaining this. I don't remember consenting to donor sperm. Could you have signed it while groggy from pre-surgery medication? Sometimes they give you anti-anxiety drugs before surgery that cause temporary amnesia. That was possible. I vaguely remembered being given something to help me relax before the procedure. Had I signed forms while under the influence of amnestic medications? Had someone explained a research study to me while I was too drugged to understand or remember? I hired a lawyer, a medical malpractice attorney named Patricia Hernandez, who specialized in informed consent cases. She reviewed all the documentation, the surgical consent forms, the research study consent, the genetic testing results, everything. This is a clear violation of informed consent, Patricia said. You were given amnestic medications and then asked to sign consent for a research procedure you wouldn't have agreed to if you'd been fully informed and not impaired. That's textbook illegal. The clinic is liable for everything: medical malpractice, battery, violation of research ethics protocols, probably more charges I'll identify as we investigate further. We sued the clinic. The case took 18 months to work through the legal system. Discovery revealed that the research study had been conducted by a fertility doctor named Drs. Richard Brennan, who'd been experimenting with implantation techniques without proper oversight, who'd been enrolling women in studies they didn't fully understand, who'd been using donor sperm from a bank he had financial interest in. 13 other women came forward with similar stories. Women who'd gone to the clinic or for routine procedures and ended up pregnant with donor sperm babies they hadn't consented to. women whose husbands weren't the genetic fathers of their children, because Dr. Brennan had decided, without proper consent, to use them as research subjects. Dr. Brennan lost his medical license. The clinic settled all 14 lawsuits for undisclosed amounts. Mine was substantial enough to pay for Owen's college education, and then some. The story made national news. Fertility doctors secretly inseminates patients without consent, ran in outlets from CNN to the New York Times. But none of that changed the fundamental reality. Owen wasn't genetically James's son. Was the result of donor sperm used without my informed consent during a procedure I'd thought was just removing a cyst? James and I went to therapy. A lot of therapy. Dr. Rebecca Stone specialized in families dealing with unexpected genetic revelations. She helped us process the violation of what had been done to me, the grief James felt about not being Owen's biological father, the questions about whether this changed anything about our family. "Does Owen feel different to you now?" Dr. Stone asked James. "Now that you know he's not genetically yours?" James thought about it. "No, he feels the same. He's still my son. I've raised him for 5 years. Biology doesn't change that he's mine in every way that matters." "What matters more?" Dr. Stone asked. "Genetics or relationship?" "Relationship," James said firmly. "Genetics just explain where physical features come from. Relationship explains who we are to each other. Owen is my son because I'm his father, because I've been there for every moment of his life, because I love him, not because we share DNA. We decided not to tell Owen until he was older, not to burden him with the complicated story of his conception until he was mature enough to understand the nuance. For now, he's 5 years old. He knows James as dad, knows we love him, knows he's wanted and cherished, and part of this family, regardless of how he was conceived. We also decided to try to identify Owen's biological father, the sperm donor, whose genetic material was used without my consent. The records from Dr. Brennan's clinic showed a donor number, and with help from our lawyer, we were able to contact the sperm bank and get identifying information. His name was Marcus Liu. He'd been a medical student in 2018 when he donated sperm to help pay for school. He was now Dr. Marcus Liu, a pediatrician in Seattle. He'd had no idea his sperm had been used without proper consent in Dr. Brennan's illegal research study. We contacted him, explained the situation. He was horrified. I donated sperm thinking I was helping families who consciously chose donors. I never imagined it would be used to secretly inseminate women without their knowledge. Marcus didn't want to insert himself into Owen's life. Said he wasn't Owen's father, that James was. That genetics didn't create parental relationships. But he agreed to be available if Owen ever wanted to know about his genetic origins, if understanding his biological background became important as he grew older. Last month, James legally adopted Owen. Even though Owen was already legally his son from birth, James wanted the formal adoption to emphasize that their relationship wasn't based on the fraudulent circumstances of Owen's conception, but on the deliberate choice to be father and son. The adoption ceremony was small, just us and the judge and our close family. When the judge asked James why he was adopting a child who was already legally his, James said, "Because I want Owen to know that I chose him. Not because DNA made him mine, but because love did. Because being a father is about showing up every day, not about genetic contribution to conception. Because he's my son, and I'm his father. And that's a choice I make every day. The DNA test that started all this sits in my desk drawer. The first test, the one that arrived accidentally and revealed everything. I keep it as a reminder of how much can be hidden beneath the surface of what appears to be normal life. How you can think you understand your family's story and then discover there are chapters you never knew existed. Owen is 5 now, smart, funny, kind. He has brown eyes that came from Marcus Liu. He has my laugh. He has mannerisms he learned from James, the way he tilts his head when he's thinking, the way he says, actually, before correcting something, the way he approaches problems systematically. Nature and nurture combine to make him who he is. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if James had never ordered that first DNA test. If we'd gone our whole lives not knowing about the donor sperm, about Dr. Brennan's illegal study, about the violation of my consent. Would that have been better? Simpler? But I think knowing is better. Because now our family is built on truth rather than assumption. Because James actively chose to be Owen's father instead of just assuming biology made him one. Because Owen will grow up knowing that family is about love and choice and commitment, not just about genetic inheritance. The DNA test revealed that Owen wasn't genetically James's son, but it also revealed something more important, that being a father is about more than DNA, that families are built through daily choices to love and support each other. That biology matters less than relationship. James is Owen's father, not because of genetics, but because he's been there for every moment, every milestone, every ordinary day. Because when he found out Owen wasn't biologically his, he chose to be Owen's father anyway, chose adoption, chose love over genetics. That's what the DNA test taught us. Not that our family was built on lies, though it partially was due to Dr. Brennan's criminal conduct, but that our family is built on choices, on James choosing to be Owen's father even after learning genetics said he wasn't, on me choosing to forgive James for the secret DNA test because it came from fear, not malice, on both of us choosing to build a life with Owen that's defined by love rather than by the circumstances of his conception. The DNA test changed everything, and it changed nothing. Owen is still our son. We're still his parents. We're still a family. We just know more about how that family came to be than we did before. And that knowledge, while painful in its acquisition, has made us stronger. Because now we know what we're choosing. Not just each other, but this life, this family, this child who came to us through circumstances none of us would have chosen, but who we choose every day now that he's here. That's the story of the DNA test, not an affair, but medical malpractice, not betrayal, but violation of consent, not evidence of my infidelity, but evidence of a doctor who played God with people's reproductive futures without permission. The DNA test revealed a truth that was more complicated and more disturbing than a simple affair could ever be. But it also revealed that our family was strong enough to survive the revelation, that James's love for Owen was bigger than genetics, that Owen's place in our family was secure regardless of whose sperm was used to conceive him. We're still processing everything, still in therapy, still figuring out how to explain this to Owen when he's old enough to understand. But we're doing it together, as a family, because that's what we are, regardless of what DNA tests say. The test results can't change that. Can't change 5 years of James being Owen's father. Can't change the love we've built. Can't change the family we've chosen to be. Sometimes genetics matter, but sometimes, often, relationship matters more. That's what the DNA test taught me, that being a parent is about showing up, not about whose DNA created the child. That family is a choice you make every day, not just a biological fact you're born into. James chose to be Owen's father, chose it legally through adoption, chose it emotionally through continuing to love him after the DNA revelation, chose it practically through being present for every ordinary moment of parenting. That choice matters more than any DNA test ever could. That's the truth that emerged from the painful discovery that Owen wasn't genetically James's. A truth about what really makes a family. A truth about love being stronger than biology. And that truth is worth everything we went through to discover it.